founder and CEO of Vinco Bar Exam Coaching. And welcome to Beyond the Bar Exam. Today we are doing a special edition for Bar Exam Summit with our former student and friend, Miguel Lozada. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
How you doing?
Good. I mean, as good as can get. I'm just really blessed to be here and have family who are healthy during this time. So just really honored and feel good to be here.
I know it's like the worst question to ask. Like, yeah, I'm doing about as well as everyone's doing. Thanks, Carrie. that's usually my answer is like, oh.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna jump in, and I love this series so much because Vinco is about so much more than just helping people pass the bar exam. The bar exam isn't the goal. Like, people get so tied up in their journey, particularly if they don't pass the bar on their first try, that the bar exam becomes this big thing, when really all along it's about like what's on the other side. You went to school to be a lawyer, not to take the bar exam. And the goal here is to highlight that and show that people, no matter what their journey with the bar exam was, at the end of the day, once they cross that hurdle, they are a lawyer and they are doing amazing things with their life and career like you are. So we'll talk about the bar exam. We'll talk about maybe law school a little bit, and then we'll talk about what you're doing now. So This is a special bar exam edition. We will start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about your bar exam journey and what, from where you started to when you passed?
Yeah. So when I first started out, I obviously graduated in May 2019, and I signed up for Barbary. I studied with two other gentlemen in a house that we had in East Meadow, Long Island. So we would wake up at 9, kind of study, get some breakfast and all that. And I ended up taking, it's the end of July. So, I took the July 2019 bar exam, didn't pass the first time. And that was, of course, frustrating. But the first time I did a million different things. So I did Barbary, I did like classes at my law school. There was a whole bunch of programs that I did. I just didn't really focus. And it was a little difficult, studying with other people, especially because that wasn't something that I did in law school. We would study in groups towards closer to the exam, but never for, a really extended time. That was my first bar exam journey. And then of course, the second time around, I found Vinco and I met Leslie, who was an amazing tutor. Shout out Leslie. Amazing. And I took the February 2020 exam.
I like to ask, so in addition, since we sort of have a dual focus today on your life beyond the bar exam, but also your bar exam journey, I think representation is so important. I was talking about this with one of the other panels I did, and not only in terms of like seeing necessarily like people who look like you in terms of race or gender or sexual orientation, but also experience. Like, so many people look at lawyers and like, we don't wear badges that say I passed the first time or I didn't pass the first, so they don't know, look at this person who I admire and is so successful. Maybe they didn't pass on their first try. So even just sharing the story that was your experience is so helpful. Would you talk about the impact that not passing the first time, like if any, had on your mindset going into your second time studying? Everyone kind of handles that piece of it differently.
So it is always, I'm sure for everyone, it's definitely a shocker getting that email. It's devastating. I told myself I never wanted to feel like that again. So I work at the Bronx DA's office, and my class was 64 people. 60 people passed, only 4 people didn't. So that's a really good pass rate, and I was so happy for my colleagues. But I was just devastated because this office had invested in me, and I felt like I let them down. I felt like I let my parents down. So that was, how you feel initially. I played sports growing up. I played sports in college, and you don't always win unless you're, the Yankees or something like that, which they don't even win. But sports really helped me deal with it in the beginning, because I was like, look, they trust you. And my office is really good with people who don't pass the first time. So they give you some time off to be able to study. So I knew I had that, and I had really supportive parents. But yeah, going into that second exam, it was difficult because your confidence is shot. Like, the first couple weeks, you're just like really down. I remember I was supposed to meet a buddy of mine that night, and I got home from work because I found out 7, like 10. I was about to get in the shower, and I was like, oh, I got to go to work. I got to like really talk to Kyle. It's horrible. It's a horrible experience. Um, After work, I get home, and I was about to just break down and just like, cry. But I just said, you know what? Get out the apartment, leave your room. Otherwise, it's gonna be bad. But yeah, to answer your question, going into the second time, it's crazy how like the bar exam is set up for lawyers and stuff, because you don't feel like you're a lawyer until you pass that, which is not true. You've gone through the hell works with law school and stuff, and you're capable of doing it until you get that badge of honor. But if it wasn't for Leslie and it wasn't for the Vinco experience, that second bar exam, I don't know, and my family, of course, I don't know what it would have looked like. So
Like having that, it's like, you take the hit, and it impacts everyone differently. Most of the students we work with are have failed the bar exam at least once, many of them twice. That is the biggest demographic of people who hire us are on their third time, and everyone is processing that differently, and it impacts them differently, but you have to deal with it, right? Like, I imagine that the coping mechanism wasn't just to stuff it down and pretend it didn't happen. You had to go through like a process of accepting that had happened, and figuring out how you could still be successful despite that. I love the sports like analogy with that in the training. I have found that a lot with people who have that background, that they are able to make those comparisons, and that helps them a lot. With so you were very, in this regard, and you highlighted this already, lucky that you had a supportive work environment. We've worked with a lot of students from your office there, and talk about like balancing that, because you did work for some of the time leading up to the bar exam. So what was it like managing for those few weeks that you had to do it, working full time and studying?
it's tough. I know for me, I wouldn't have been able to pass the exam while working full time the whole extended time. But the first couple weeks were tough because, especially at the DA's office, and I'm sure for other attorneys who have to work and study at the same time, you're dealing with victims, you're dealing with people, and that can weigh on you. And it's like, how can I give someone my 100% attention when I'm struggling right now, like, and I have to study? So the first couple weeks were tough for sure. Um, but I think that's why having Leslie there and having an accountability person to keep me accountable and really encourage me, that was honestly one of the biggest things that really helped me pass that second time, was the encouragement, the constant accountability. But it was definitely tough because you're juggling, you're in your head, you're like, I have to study 6 hours, I have to study 6 hours, but you're getting home at like 5 or 6, and that's not realistic, so you really want to hone in on those 2-3 hours of really good studying time. But it was definitely tough in the first couple of weeks. um but yeah, I wasn't going to be able, I'm glad they gave me some time off
That you
because
had
there's
that
no way.
option.
Yeah.
Listen, some people do that. Like, there, a lot of our students, I think more than 50% of our students are working full time until like the last 2 weeks. Like, you guys get
Yeah.
more the option for more time, but it's usually those last 2 weeks. And they do it. And I also think that you benefited from the framework of success, that there were a lot of people who had come before you at your office who had this experience. Like, your class happened to have a really good pass rate, but I remember classes like a year or two before where
Oh yeah.
they did not, right? We worked with
15
several
people.
students.
Right.
We had one administration, we had 12 students just from that office. And so like, you had the comfort of knowing a lot of them had worked with us. So there was that piece, but also knowing that then they did it, right? Like, that they're still there. They still had their jobs, that it was a good environment for that. And when people don't have that, it's really important for them to create it for themselves, right? Like, you had that, and you had the support of your family. But some people don't have that. And so they have to kind of figure out ways to put that structure in place for themselves as well. So let's talk about changes, because, and this I think works with sports too, right? It's like, to get from where you are to where you want to be, chances are you've got to make a change. So on the time, and I think you maybe started to allude to this a little already, but on the first time you took it, what are some of the things that after you were studying in a more effective way, you were like, wow, that was really unhelpful. Like, how I was doing that before was just not it.
Yeah. So the first time, like I mentioned, I studied with two other guys, really smart kids, some of my best friends from law school. But for me, that wasn't my studying like a really good habit for me to study with other people, because I'm always, if they're around, you're going to ask people inevitably questions about certain topics in the bar exam. But I was always on my phone as well the first time, and you don't realize how staring at your phone for 5 minutes actually like pushes you back like another 30 minutes, because have to get back into the rhythm. So studying with the phone, studying with people, and then I did too many programs. I was doing Adaptive Bar, which is a great program. That's fine. And then I was doing another PMBR on top of Barbary questions. And I was just all over the place the first time. So Vinko really helped me, and Leslie really helped me obviously get a schedule down. We got a specific program for questions, but I was really just focused on one program. I didn't have people around me. I had just moved to the city, and it wasn't the biggest apartment. So my room was a vacuum. There was nowhere to be distracted from. I just had my desk. And then the Vinko coaches, and of course the encouragement you guys have on Saturdays, which are really cool. That was a really nice change up, having the group study, because you're studying by yourself. You might get in your head a little bit, but seeing other people going through the struggle as well and getting encouragement from them was tremendous.
It's
So
like the
those were the
group study.
yeah,
It was like the group study that you were doing before, but without like like it seems
not
like
every
you had to
day.
do it all the
Yeah.
time, right? Because you were
Hmm.
there together, and like this is sort of like a little addition that you could do.
Exactly.
I was laughing when you said that you were on your phone the first time. I'm like, did Leslie come and forcibly take it from you? Because that's her style. She will do that. But resource overload, that is, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I'm sure that there are a lot of repeat takers watching this, and that is something that second time repeat takers in particular are the most susceptible to. So it's interesting to hear that that was your experience the first time. A lot of times people just do that bar prep program, whatever it is, Barbary, Caplet, Themis, doesn't matter. They get that, they keep their eye on just their program, and their traps that they fall into are a little bit different. So it's nice for people to hear, that this is something that could happen even to a first time taker, where more isn't always better, because
No. Yeah.
you had, maybe you were duplicating things, right? Like maybe you did like the same like area of law in every category, but then didn't get to something else that was more important or equally as important, something like that. So it's not to say that supplements aren't good, and sometimes we encourage them, but it's about how you use them.
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah.
something I think Leslie was
Absolutely.
helpful, kind of saying, you do this, don't do that, kind of customization. So absolutely something to look out for. So aside from like getting sort of the resources and the plan under control on the time that you passed, what are a couple of like changes that you made or things that you thought were really effective that maybe you weren't doing the first time?
Really taking the time to go over the areas of law during like essays. I didn't really take essays that serious the first time. Leslie had the breakdown, the Vinco breakdown on how to write an essay was tremendous, because one, you're not only learning to write the essay, but you're also learning that area of law, which is going to help you in the end with the multiple choice. So that was tremendous. Doing an essay a day, timed. That might be a lot for some people, but for me, it helped a lot. Just doing, it's only 30 minutes, and then going through the steps and reading the answer. So that was helpful. Also doing, this is funny. Leslie was like, all right, 35 questions a day, or it was like 33.
Yeah.
And she had planned a days to do it. And then you would go over the answers. I would briefly do that the first time, like, all right, got it wrong, I'll remember. But the second time I really just dove into it. And you think it's obvious, but it's not. So that helped. And then one day I just wanted to do, I was like, I'm not listening to Leslie. I'm going to do 50 questions. So I did 50 questions, and I did horrible. And it was like a huge dip. And Leslie was like, Miguel, why are you doing 50 questions? I told you not to do that. So now tomorrow you're going to do 17. So like,
she said, you're not there yet. We're getting there. We're not there yet. There's a process.
so it's like we said before, like more is not always better. It's really just focusing and taking the time and being patient with learning why you got something wrong and why you got something right as well. So
yeah, there's a system and a method, and it's not, a lot of times the coaches, the way I describe it is that we're all drawing from the same or similar toolboxes, right? We all know the same stuff, but then how it's getting applied to, Miguel or someone else, it's going to look different, and it's a little trial and error. So figuring out that, like, okay. And particularly, you know, we were chatting a little bit before the call about with your background with sports and all of that too. It's like that structure, it was probably exactly what you needed. It's like, okay, first we have to go through this part and then we can go through this part. It's like learning each skill individually before putting them together. And you probably know from other areas of your life that if you skip the steps, then it kind of can fall apart. So I think that's, you know, really interesting and good change. What about like in terms of number of practice questions? Did you turn that up the second time, or had you been doing a lot of like in terms of multiple choice, had you been doing a lot of questions the first time as well?
No, it was the first time. I got Adaptabar, like I said, which is an online question bank. But I did not do as many questions as I did with Vinco. I think I did like 3,000 plus. Um, and the reason why I love that that was such an emphasis with the program is that it's like sports too. Like, and I'm always going to go back to sports, but it's like when you practice, you want to practice a sport situation. You want to practice, hey, there's 2 outs, or, you know, there's a couple seconds left on the clock. What am I going to do in this situation? And that's what the practicing under time situations with the so many questions does for you, because you go into the exam and it feels like a practice. Look, I've been here before. I've done 50 questions. I can do 200. I can do 100 in a certain amount of time. So I definitely didn't do as many the first time, but the second time I did, like I said, 3,000 plus. And again, that helps you with the areas of law for vice versa for the essays, or while you're studying, of course, not during the exam, but definitely doing as many. I always give that advice to people who are taking the exam: do as many as you can. Don't be afraid to do 10 or 20 a day. Just don't over, you know, strain yourself like I did that one day and did, you know, 50. Unless
It's
it's a
like
practice day.
pulling a mental muscle essentially is what you did. I was like, no, too much. But that, you know, this is something that came up a lot in one of the other panels that I did, was this idea of you learn the law through doing the practice questions, which is like, that is a hill that I am prepared to die on. Like I make this is like my life's work, is to convince people that you don't need to memorize first and practice second. And that if you try to do that, it is a recipe for
Oh,
failure every
absolutely.
time,
Totally
because
agree.
you're never going to feel ready to start practicing. You're going to sit there and be like, I'm never going to learn all this law. And you're never going to learn all the law. No matter how you do it, you're never going to learn all the law. But at least if you're practicing, you're both learning it and building the skills at the same time. And so it's been an interesting theme to hear all of you on the flip side really saying that putting those two things together instead of viewing them separately was helpful for you. So I have one more bar question, but I'm going to hold that for the very last question. And I want to shift a little bit to the beyond the bar exam part of the discussion, which is, you know, talk a little bit about like how your life and career and things have changed since you passed the bar exam and what you've been up to.
So I feel like my legal journey, it hasn't been unique because everyone's been going through the COVID situation. But it's been crazy because I'm an ADA. I'm a prosecutor at the Bronx District Attorney's Office. Love my office, amazing people. In January or February 20 or in January of 2020, they just passed new discovery, bail reform, law, new stuff that hadn't been done in like 60 years. So that was a learning curve for all the ADAs in the office, which was wild because now you have to certify cases, which is a whole new topic. So I had to deal with failing the bar, new discovery laws, and then the pandemic hit. So I really haven't been in the office. It's going to be a year now. So the transition of doing everything online has been really difficult for a lot of people. But that's what you have to do as an attorney. You have to maneuver and you have to be able to, you know, get over hurdles and get over obstacles, just like it is with the bar exam. You have to be able to, you know, break yourself down and, you know, really focus on what you want to accomplish. But so I've been prosecuting cases. I have victims, or I'm sorry, I deal with people who are victims of crimes where it could be petty larcenies, grand larcenies, assault cases. Yeah, and you're just dealing with people, and that's what I wanted to do after law school. I wanted to make sure that I could be a voice for people who don't have a voice, and I could be able to help them in really difficult situations. So
Was
from
this
that,
the plan in law school? Like, is this why you had gone to law school, or and what your passion was all along?
no, I wanted to be a defense attorney. So, interesting situation. I really went through a really personal family experience that pushed me into the law realm. And I always thought I wanted to be a defense attorney, and it wasn't for my mock trial coaches who gave me a really interesting take on what I wanted to accomplish as an attorney. They said, Miguel, the way you think, you're a fair-minded individual. As a prosecutor, you have all the tools at your availability where you can be compassionate towards defendants. You can be, you can really advocate for the people that you're representing in the Bronx or in the state of New York. So that's why I chose to be a prosecutor. One, for the trial experience, and two, for, I have the discretion to either dismiss a case or really pursue justice for an individual. So that's really why I wanted to be a prosecutor. And I feel like a lot of people don't have that outlook, and sometimes we may look like the bad guy, but we're really looking out for the good for all, to be honest. So that was why.
I love that story, and I love to. I know a lot of people who will watch this specific video are probably on the other side of law school, but I always think it's helpful to share stories about careers not going the way that we had exactly planned. And you might not know this about me, but I went to law school to be a prosecutor. That was what I wanted to do. That was my dream job. Most specifically, and you'll find this funny, I wanted to be a prosecutor at the Bronx District Attorney's Office. So I did every prosecutor externship. I worked at the New York Attorney General's office. I mean, I had the experience, I had the references, I took the classes, I had 3 interviews with the Bronx District Attorney's Office, and then I did not get the job. And so now it is March of my 3rd year of law school, and I didn't get a job anywhere. I got no district attorney positions, no ADA position, and I had to figure out what I was going to do. So I took a 1-year fellowship doing immigration deportation defense. And after approximately 8 minutes of doing that job, I was like, I would have hated your prosecutor. Like I was doing very complicated, but my clients have been charged with very serious crimes. Yeah. And I was doing the immigration piece, but I was frequently coordinating with their defense attorneys and doing that. And I loved it. And I was like, I can't imagine if I loved this as much as I love this, that I would have loved that as much as I love doing this. And so I always tell that story as it's like the best laid plans. And you go in, you and I like to think now that we canceled each other out in the world. We went and flip-flop sides. But that you can still end up doing something that you love. And I wrote an article for Above the Law. The title was How Not Getting My Dream Job Was the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me. And it's because I had that job that I stayed on my law school campus, and that's how I started teaching. And that's how I started coaching. And that's how I started so everything, can still fall into place. And it sounds like the same thing for you. It's like you had this vision and you had this plan. And then through the people you met and the experiences you had, you made different decisions. My decisions were made for me, but you had different, you were able to make different decisions. And I think it's, as important to hear that the bar exam doesn't necessarily go as planned, it's as important to hear that life doesn't always go as planned, and that you can still love your job and do something meaningful. So I love that. I love that story so much. Something else I really want you to talk about and this is part of why I do this Beyond the Bar Exam series, is because our alum are doing really incredible things even outside of their jobs. And I just learned that you have this nonprofit organization. So would you share with us about that? Like how it started, what's going on with it, all that?
Absolutely. Well, one, I'm glad you didn't get your dream job, because there would have been no Vinco, and I would not have passed the second time without Vinco. But yeah, so I have a nonprofit organization called Puerto Rico Lacrosse. We started it, the co-founder and I, in 2015. It actually started because I thought I was the only Puerto Rican lacrosse player in the world. And this goes to representation and shows, how important it is, because I honestly thought, I grew up in Long Island, really only Hispanic in my school, the only kid that played lacrosse. It's a weird sport. I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I want to quit baseball to play lacrosse. And Puerto Ricans, we love baseball. That's like what we do. And he's like, you want to play Quidditch? Like, what do you want to do? Like, what?
That hits, sir.
He was devastated, because it's a weird game. He's like, what is this? But my dad loves me and he supported me. And so in 2015, I said, look, there's no way I'm the only person out there. So the whole purpose of Puerto Rico Lacrosse is to allow players throughout the United States and in Puerto Rico the opportunity to play lacrosse. And why that's important is because lacrosse is a really small knit community. If you know someone who plays, I don't know, you play in New York or something, you might meet someone in Colorado. I'm like, oh, I know X, I know him as well. And it's just like an instant connection, and not a connection everybody has. So it has connections in professional world, the legal fields. If you want, there's a lot of doctors that have played lacrosse. So I want that for the disenfranchised youth in Puerto Rico. And that's what we do. We do clinics throughout the United States for a lot of Hispanic communities and minorities in general who want to come to our clinics. And then we also have national teams that compete at the highest level. And it's always funny when we have an event, and I always say the first line. Everyone's like, dude, you say this every time, but it's true, because I thought I was the only Puerto Rican lacrosse player. And it wasn't until we got this going that you realize how many more people are out there. And I think that could equate back to the bar exam. You're not the only person who's failed this exam. And being able to have a group like Vinco provided, and being able to see the representation and be connected, can really help you succeed. And we've seen that with our organization, where we've gotten emails just saying, I can't thank you enough for starting this, because now my kid is just, he thought he was the only player on his team now too. And it's, I'm getting a little emotional now, but it's a cool feeling when you can start a team with a lot of people who look like you, and you realize you're not the only one out there. So that's what we're doing. We're really excited. And
Well, you'll have to send me the email or send me the website, and I'll make sure to link it with this video so people
absolutely.
can find out how to donate or how to participate in what you're doing, because that's
Mm.
incredible. And I think the message is like, there's such power in community and like building community around something, because it's about lacrosse and it's about seeing yourself and people who look like you doing that, but it's also about building like that network, like you're saying, like there's this community, and like, oh, there's doctors and lawyers and other professionals, and like giving people the opportunity to get plugged into that community and make those connections can then become, oh, who can write me a letter of recommendation for college, or who can, be a mentor to me if I'm going to go to med school or law school or whatever.
Right.
Like, you can meet them in these settings as well. And so, I mean, I'm sure it ends up being about much more than lacrosse too for the
Absolutely.
kids you're getting involved in this. And um I think that's incredible. And when you say equate it to kind of what we do here, the community aspect, it's always the thing I have the hardest time. People are like, well, why Vinco and not somewhere else? And it's like, I'm totally biased in favor of our students. It's like, well, because it's not me, it's not just your coach, it's the whole package. And it's like, how many of our students now, our alum, are referring cases to each other? The first series for Beyond the Bar Exam were for the small businesses. Many of our students have opened firms, and I wanted to highlight them. And they have like their own mini referral network of like Vinco alum who refer to Vinco alum. Like, I mean, those awesome. Are like, it's amazing. Yeah. And that's why, I want to do these series and highlight these things, because it's like, hey, if I hadn't followed you back on Instagram, like I wouldn't have known about this, and then I couldn't have shared about it. And I want to know all the cool things that the alum are doing, so that we can, there's just power there, right? And knowing, people are like, yeah, like I know Miguel, I went through Vinco with him, like he's a good guy, he does. So anyway, I see that parallel that you were saying as well. Yeah. And I just think that absolutely, the two things, community and representation within the community, I just think the more we can focus and work towards that, maybe the better world, maybe we can make a little bit of a better world for us women. So I want to ask you one last question. Going back to the bar exam for the last question is, most of the people watching this are probably gearing up to take the bar in maybe a few months, maybe within the year. And they want to know from you, Miguel, what is your best piece of advice for them? If you can tell them one thing, give them one message, what would you say?
I think the one piece of advice would be, I have twofold, and it'll go back to community, but the one is cut the distractions out. Inevitably, we're all going to be distracted by something, but don't be afraid to cut certain people out of your circle for the time being. It doesn't mean you have to, cut them out of your life entirely, but I know there were definitely some relationships that I know for a fact hindered me the first time. That really, it just makes it difficult with certain, situations. Cut the distractions out. It might not be people. It might be, like I said, your phone. It could be TV. It could be just anything. Cut the distractions out for a time, because I promise you, it is so worth it once you pass the exam and you look back at how hard you worked and see it finally come to fruition. I know it's not fair to say, like, we don't always feel like a lawyer when you fail the exam, even though you should feel like that. But when you pass it, it's just so rewarding. So cut the distractions out. It's worth it for sure. And then two, like you said, don't be afraid to put yourself in a community and don't be embarrassed by failing. A lot of people have failed. So I know I met Danae and Daphne's through the process. And I think that was like the peer-to-peer situation that Vinco set
Yeah.
up, which was tremendous because I know every day we were just encouraging each other. And there are days where you're going to get 20 wrong on a 30 question set, and being able to fall back in that community and say, look, I did terrible today. And they're like, look, it's okay. It's one day. You're not going to fail the second time. Or even if you do, just having that encouragement there was tremendous. So being able to connect with the community, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and then cut the distractions out. As hard as it may be, it'll be worth it for the 2 months or whatever time you have to study.
I think that
That'd be
is
my advice. Yeah.
amazing advice. And thank you so much for taking the time to
Thanks for having
share
me.
about your experience and what you've been up to. For those of you watching, we will make sure to, like I said, link to Miguel's nonprofit organization so that you can learn more about it. And I will see you all on the next edition of Beyond the Birds.